Well, welcome back. We're about to begin our Mincha service, our afternoon service for Yom Kippur. And as you know, those of you who are regulars to CBS services, we're going to do Mincha, and we're going to take about a 2-beat break and go into Yizkor. And when we finish Yizkor, we're going to go right into Ne'ilah. And at the end of Ne'ilah, we'll be done. We're going to do Havdalah. We're going to do a Tekiah Gedolah at the end of the service. And we'll be done. And alas and alack, we're not going to be able to go to the back of the sanctuary or wherever you normally have this and have bagels and orange juice. But maybe you have that set up at your place. So have a bagel and think of me and Andy. We're on page 398. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, Ve'Konei Hakol, Ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבעל עדיך, ככתוב. ויגבה אדוני צבאות במשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Amen. God of holiness, let your glory be with us always as a holy light, illuminating for us the paths of righteousness. For you are holy, your name is holy, and those who strive to be holy declare your glory day by day. Blessed is the Eternal One who rules in holiness. Page 404.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have sinned against life by failing to work for peace. We have sinned against life by keeping silent in the face of injustice.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have sinned against life by ignoring those who suffer in distant lands. We have sinned against life by forgetting the poor in our own midst.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have failed to respect those made in the image of God. We have withheld our love from those who depend on us.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have engaged in gossip and in repeated slander. We have distorted the truth for our own advantage.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך,
We have conformed to fashion and not to conscience. We have indulged in despair and trafficked with cynics.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך,
We have given meager support to our houses of study. We have neglected our heritage of learning.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך,
We have sinned against ourselves and paid scant heed to the life of the Spirit. We have sinned against ourselves and have not risen to fulfill the best that is in us.
ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
Bottom of page 406. Modim anachnu lach she'atahu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'Elohei imotenu Elohei kol basar yotzreinu yotzer boreshit brachot v'hodaot l'shimcha hagadol v'hakadosh al shehecheyitanu v'kiyamtanu. God of Israel's past, God of this day, God of all flesh, Creator of all life, we praise you, the Most High, for the gift of life. We give thanks, O source of good, that life endures. Eternal and infinite God, help us to use our life for blessing, to live by your law, to do your will, to walk in your way with a whole heart. We praise you, eternal God, for the blessing of life. We continue on page 408.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמרו אמן. Yai-da-da-dai-dai-dai, 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 yai-da-dai-dai-dai, yai-da-da-dai-dai-dai, 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 yai-da-da-dai-dai-dai. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו אמן.
Aleinu, page 409.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבותי לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד.
So we come to a part in the service called the Avodah service. In the traditional Machzor, traditional Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur prayer book, there's a pattern that's replicated here, but in the traditional prayer book, it's a little different. The creators of this Avodah service, in this book that was published, I think around 1977, 1978, they took the themes, but they changed the readings in very interesting ways. And right now, we're going to do very little of it, but I just want to tell you what it is. If you turn to page 410, you'll see that that it's given the subtitle, From Creation to Redemption. And so it doesn't purport. It uses traditional Jewish text and sometimes non-traditional Jewish text to trace, you might say, the mythological and then historical history of the Jewish people from creation to a sense of redemption, which it marks by the creation of the State of Israel following the Holocaust, which is, of course, a terribly low point. We're going to do just a couple pieces of this, parts that I think, to my mind, are essential. One of them is the section called Eile Eskara. And the Eile Eskara is a part of this Avodah service that refers to 10 martyrs that died at the hands of the Romans in the 2nd century. Sages, teachers who continue to teach Torah in the face of prohibition from the Romans. And it's just very powerful. And it may be a personal preference of mine to bring this up as opposed to all the other prayers in the Avodah. But I think it's important. It just brings an important part of our past into the present. So we are on page 429. We're going to read a few pieces of this. 429. God's witnesses, God's servants, generation after generation, in times of darkness as in times of light, we have heard the divine word. You shall be to me a people of priests and a holy nation. We have felt the joy of being God's servants. We have also felt the pain, for it has been our destiny to be God's suffering servants, and so did we appear to be to the nations. They had no outward grace to attract the eye, no beauty to win the heart. They were despised and rejected, a people of pains and acquainted with grief. As one from whom all turned their face, so were they despised, and we held them of no account. Yet it was our suffering they bore, our pains they endured, and we supposed them punished by God, afflicted. All the while they were wounded by our misdeeds, crushed by our sins. They were oppressed, they were afflicted, yet they never said a word. Like lambs led to the slaughter, like sheep standing dumb before their shearers, they never uttered a cry. By violence and injustice were they carried off. Who cared about their fate when they were cut off from the land of the living? They were given graves among the wicked, a tomb among the base, though they had done no wrong, practiced no deception. Middle of page 431. Eile eskara v'nafshi alai eshbecha, ki v'alunu zedim, ke'uga b'li hafucha, ki bimei hasar lo alta arucha, la asara haruge melucha. These things do I remember. Through all the years, ignorance, like a monster, has devoured our martyrs, as in one long day of blood. Rulers have arisen through the endless years, oppressive, savage in their witless power, filled with a futile thought to make an end of that which God has cherished. In the time of Hadrian, page 432, in the time of Hadrian, emperor of Rome, the study and practice of Torah were forbidden. Israel's leaders said, how survive without the tree of life? Why live when the soul is dead? And so they taught and learned and did God's will. Israel's 10 leaders were taken and doomed. Shimon ben Gamliel was slain. Remembering his wisdom and witnessing his death, disciples exclaimed, is this the Torah, and is this its reward? Rabbi Ishmael was next to die. In pain and anguish, he cried out, and at his cry, the heavens trembled. Accept this, affirm me, for if you fail, the world must crumble into chaos. Then Ishmael accepted his fate and said, I will trust in you, even though you slay me. Akiva had defied the decree and continued to teach. He was among those taken. He was led to his death at the time when the Shema is recited. As his flesh was flayed, he said, Shema Yisrael. Even now, his disciples asked, He replied, "All my life this verse has troubled me. Love your eternal God with all your being. Love God, though you must die for it. I prayed always to be able to fulfill this, and now I can." And with his final breath, he said, Adonai Echad, the eternal God is one, prolonging the last word until life was gone. Thus, in a godless world, God was affirmed. The Romans had forbidden the ordination of rabbis, decreeing death to ordainer and those ordained, and destruction for the city in which the ordination would take place. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava ordained 5 in the hills between 2 cities, Shepharam and Usha. When the enemy soldiers were upon them, Rabbi Yehuda told his disciples to flee. "What will become of you?" they cried. He answered, "I shall place myself before them as an immovable rock." And so he did. And the Roman lances struck him down, but the disciples escaped. The 10 included other teachers, 10 teachers among many. Dying, they did not perish. Their faith is immortal, their God eternal. We're going to continue now on page 437. As I said, this is a mythological and also historical history of the Jewish people. And so the piece I'm going to read now is a tribute, you might say. It's a poem regarding the Holocaust, page 437. Now the lifeless skulls add up to millions. The stars are going out around you. The memory of you is dimming. Your reign will soon be over. Jewish seed and flower are embers. The dew cries in the dead grass. The Jewish dream and reality are ravished. They die together. Your witnesses are sleeping, infants, women, young men, old, even the 36, your saints, pillars of your world. They have fallen into a dead and everlasting sleep. Page 440. Reading number 2, the bottom of the page. A word about Leo Beck, if it's a name that's unfamiliar to you. Leo Beck was a prominent Reform rabbi in Berlin during the war, and of course before the war. He was an accomplished scholar and a successful pulpit rabbi. And at the Hebrew Union College, it wasn't the Jewish Institute of Religion in these years. The Hebrew Union College offered to sponsor him to the United States, but he refused. He chose to be with his people instead. And so he was taken from Berlin to the concentration camp of Theresienstadt, which he survived. And then he came to the United States, and he finished his career as a teacher in Cincinnati at Hebrew Union College. When Leo Beck came out of the black midnight of the concentration camp, he looked about the world and at his neighbors. Many averted their eyes. They had been silent. They had been selfish, or they had followed the multitude to do evil. In the darkness of the camps, Leo Beck had not despaired. He had fulfilled his function. He had taught, and he had given comfort. And in the darkness of the new world, which had to live with the memory of Belsen and Auschwitz, Beck had continued to teach and to comfort his people. They say that when Beck lifted his hands and spoke the priestly benediction, the congregation felt very close to the divine presence. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. These words took on new meaning for the worshipers. In ancient times, the image of one Babylonian god was a clay furnace. When the fires of human sacrifice burned high, the eyes of the idol glared death upon the onlookers. To see God was to die. Biblical Israel transformed the terror into awe, and fear became love. In God's light, we saw light, but in our days, the world grew dark again. The pagan furnace roared, and Israel ascended into the sky as smoke. And we who are alive, we wander across a darkened landscape, fitfully illuminated by burning idols, in which some exterminate their own human kin. We need our teachers, those who died for the sanctification of the divine name, and those who live to guide and comfort us. They tell us that the encounter with God can take place in utmost darkness, if we are ready for it. The blessing that shone through Leo Beck can touch our lives as well. May God look upon us and give us peace. And at the bottom of 441 is that song called the Song of the Partisans, which is said to have been a song that the Jewish partisans all over Eastern Europe resisting the Nazis sung.
Sag nicht einmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, Gott Himmeln bleiene verstellen bläue Tag, kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, Svet abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen Do, kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show, Svet abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen Do, von grünem Palmenland bis Wiesenland von Schnee, wir kommen on mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh, und wo gefallen sie, spritzt von unser Blut, sprotzen wird dort unser Gore, unser Mut, und wo gefallen sie, spritzt von unser Blut, sprotzen wird dort unser Gore, unser Mut.
Page 445. Let us remember the earth's oppressed today. Let us restore their human heritage to the victims of torture, the weak and the weary, all who are imprisoned without cause. Let us remember them, bring peace to every home and comfort to every heart. We know the wisdom by which you would have us live. Oceans of ink have been spilled to say it. Be faithful, be true, love one another as you love yourself. But the world is dark and cold with fear and rage. The hammer of chaos beats loudly within our breasts. How can we endure? This is the vision of a great and noble life, to endure ambiguity and to make light and shine through it, to stand fast in uncertainty, to prove capable of unlimited love and hope. We continue on page 450.
Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kema'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo iten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, Udvar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Beit Yaakov lechu v'necha be'or Adonai. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'Norah Shemo.
Our Torah portion this morning comes from the middle of the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, what's known as the Holiness Code. It starts off with the line, Kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall be holy people, because I, the eternal your God, am holy. Now, I'm not going to go into a long geschichte here, but I want to point out that there's a kind of there's an interesting relationship here. There's something relational going on. God is saying, you guys can be holy because I am holy, and because I'm holy, you can be holy. But what does it mean to be holy? The text says. Now, the Bible is not typically a philosophical book, so it's left up to later people like you and I to figure out what holiness means. Although the text here does, in fact, give us lots of opportunities to understand ritual kinds of ways in which it's possible for us to be holy. So we have 3 aliyot. In the bracha, the opening bracha is on the top of page 452, and the closing bracha is on the bottom of page 454. And the 3 aliyot are, anybody out there who is a member of the men's club, that's aliyah number 1. Aliyah number 2 is an aliyah for healing. That's anybody who would like to be called to the Torah for any reason of healing, physical, spiritual, or on behalf of somebody else who's in need of healing. And the third is a catch-all category, because in case we haven't invited anybody to come up and have one of these virtual aliyot, the last one is for you. So hopefully there are a couple of you, or more than a couple of you out there, who are going to respond to each of these aliyot. So let's get started. Ya'amod, what's the best way to say this? Ya'amod, Ya'amdu Chevrei Mo'adon Hagvarim La'aliyah Harishona. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Baruch Adonai Barach Liolam Va'ed. Notein HaTorah. Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el kol adat b'nei Yisrael ve'amarta aleihem. Kidoshim tehiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, ve'et shabbatotai tishmaru. Ani Adonai Elohechem. It's the end of the first aliyah. We count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Notein HaTorah. Well, folks, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do a little cheating here. The way that this Torah reading is set up by the editors, we're skipping down a bit, and to be perfectly honest, I can't find it, which is the first time I've never been able to do that. But I'm going to ask your forgiveness. This is the season. I hope you can find your way to do it. And I'm going to read from the text, the printed text. The second one is the aliyah for healing. Anybody who feels the need for healing or wants to make a prayer on behalf of anybody they know. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Baruch Adonai Barach Liolam Va'ed. Notein HaTorah. Amen. Uvakutz rechem et katsir artzechem lo tichale pa'at sadcha liktzor veleket katsircha lo tilaket. Karmacha lo te'olel uferet karmacha lo tilaket. Le'oni lager ta'azov utam. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Lo tignovu velo tichachashu velo tishakdu ish ba'amito. Velo tishavu bishmi lashaker. Chalalta et shem Elohecha ani Adonai. Lo ta'asok et re'echa lo tigzol לא תלין פעולת שכיר איתך על בוקר, ולא תקלל חירש, לפני עיוור לא תיתן מכשול, ויראת מאלוהיך, אני אדוני. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, לא תישא פני דל, ולא תעדר פני גדול, בצדק תשפוט עמיתך. לא תלך רכיל בעמך, לא תעמוד על דם רעך, אני אדוני. לא תשנא את אחיך בלבביך, הוכח תוכיח את עמיתך, ולא תישא עליו חטא. לא תיקום ולא תיטור את בני עמך, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, אני אדוני. מפני שיבה תקום, והדרת פני זקן, ויראת מאלוהיך, אני אדוני. 1, 2, 3. נותן התורה. And now anybody else? Anybody else who wants an aliyah? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Baruch Adonai Barach Leolam Va'ed. Noten HaTorah. וכי יגור איתך גר בארצכם לא תונו אותו, ואזרח מכם יהיה לכם. הגר הגר איתכם, ואהבת לו כמוך, כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. לא תעשו עוול במשפט, במידה ובמשקול ובמכשורה. אוזני צדק, אבני צדק, איפת צדק, ויהי צדק. יהיה לכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, ושמרתם את כל חוקותיי ואת כל משפטיי, ועשיתם אותם, אני אדוני. 1, 2, 3. Noten HaTorah, Amen. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. Well, we have a guest appearance from Greensboro, North Carolina, who will be joining us in momentarily. She's zooming on in. But while we're waiting, we're reading from the book of Jonah, page 456. Perhaps some of you were at the class a little earlier today that I taught on Jonah. I actually found I was able to go through the entire text word for word and have kind of a running commentary, and hopefully raised some questions and made some points about the book that perhaps you hadn't thought of. I would say that for us, to me, the single most important question about the book of Jonah is that given who this character is, a curmudgeonly prophet who runs away, and even when he does the job he's been sent to do, he's really kind of cranky about it. The question is, what is it about this book that justifies its presence in as the Haftarah for Mincha, for Yom Kippur? It's a bit of a mystery. It's also a great story, but nonetheless a mystery. So, are you ready, Betsy? All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'neviim tovim, v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nevi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
The word of the Eternal came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me. Jonah started out, however, to flee to Tarshish from the service of the Eternal. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went aboard to sail with others to Tarshish, away from the service of the Eternal. But the Eternal cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and such a tempest came upon the sea that the ship was in danger of breaking up. In their fright, the sailors cried out, each to his own god, and they flung the cargo overboard to make the ship lighter. Meanwhile, Jonah had gone into the hold of the vessel, where he lay down and fell asleep. The captain went over to him and cried out, "How can you be sleeping so soundly? Up, call upon your God. Perhaps the God will be kind to us, and we will not perish." The men said to one another, "Let us cast lots and find out on whose account this misfortune has come upon us." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They said to him, "Tell us, you who have brought this misfortune upon us, what is your business? Where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you?" "I am a Hebrew," he replied. "I worship the Eternal, the God of heaven, who made both sea and land." The men were greatly terrified, and they asked him, "What have you done?" And when the men learned that he was fleeing from the service of the Eternal, for so he told them, they said to him, "What must we do to make the sea calm around us?" For the sea was growing more and more stormy. He answered, "Heave me overboard, for I know that this terrible storm came upon you on my account." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to regain the shore, but they could not, for the sea was growing more and more stormy around them. Before throwing him overboard, they cried out to the Eternal, "Please do not let us perish on account of this man. Do not compel us to kill an innocent person. For you, O Eternal, by your will have brought this about." And they heaved Jonah overboard, and the sea stopped raging. The men were greatly in awe of the Eternal. They offered a sacrifice to the Eternal, and they made vows. The Eternal provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah remained in the fish's belly 3 days and 3 nights. Then the Eternal commanded the fish to spew Jonah out upon dry land. The word of the Eternal came to Jonah a second time. "Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it what I tell you." Jonah went at once to Nineveh, in accordance with the command of the Eternal. Nineveh was an enormously large city, a 3 days' walk across. Jonah started out and made his way into the city the distance of 1 day's walk and proclaimed, 40 days more and Nineveh shall be overthrown." The people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast and all alike put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his robe, put on sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he had the word cried through Nineveh, "By decree of the king and his nobles, neither man nor beast shall taste anything. They shall not graze, and they shall not drink water. They shall be covered with sackcloth and shall cry mightily to God. Let all turn back from their evil ways and from the injustice of which they are guilty. Who knows but what God may turn back and relent, so that we do not perish." God saw what they did, how they were running back from their evil ways, and God renounced their punishment planned for them and did not carry it out. This displeased Jonah greatly, and he was grieved. He prayed to the Eternal, saying, "Eternal One, isn't this just what I said when I was still in my own country? This is why I fled beforehand to Tarshish, for I know that you are a compassionate and gracious God, endlessly patient, abounding in love, renouncing punishment. Take my life then, for I would rather die than live to see this." The Eternal One replied, "Are you deeply grieved?" Now Jonah had left the city and found a place east of the city. He made a booth there and sat under it in the shade until he should see what happened to the city. The eternal God provided a gourd, which grew up over Jonah to provide shade for his head and save him from discomfort. Jonah was very happy about the plant. But the next day at dawn, God provided a worm, which attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a sultry east wind. The sun beat down on Jonah's head, and he became faint. He begged for death, saying, "I would rather die than live." Then God said to Jonah, "Are you so deeply grieved about the plant?" "Yes," he replied, "so deeply that I want to die." Then the Eternal said, "You care about the plant, yet you did not work on it nor cultivate it. It appeared overnight and perished overnight. And should I not care about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well?"
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh, ha'medaber u'mekayem, shekol divarav emet v'tzedek. Al ha'torah v'al ha'avodah v'al ha'nevi'im v'al yom ha'kippurim hazeh, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, למחילה ולסליחה, לכפרה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו, ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים. Well, thank you. It's funny. I was following along in this book. This book was published. This is a revised version in 1996. So you must have an older one, because there were several, not significant, but there were several differences in translation that I found sort of interesting.
You're talking to me, Cone?
Well, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to everybody out there who may have had a different translation.
Oh, okay.
But I did, and it's sort of interesting that don't know. I mean, I don't know how it happened. But
No, this actually isn't the book that you sent me, so I was reading from a different version.
Okay, all right. You're welcome. Thank you. We're on the bottom of page 468.
כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזובו, עץ חיים היא, למחזיקים בה, ותומכיה מאושר. דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם.
Page 471. God, grant that we may hearken to the solemn admonitions of this Sabbath of Sabbaths in true contrition and humility. Help us to fulfill our obligation to the needy and distressed. Incline our hearts to compassion that we may aid the poor, the homeless, and the suffering. Help us to be as parents to the needy, eyes to the blind, and feet to the lame. Teach us to be generous in our support of all good works. Bless all who labor unselfishly for the welfare and happiness of their brothers and sisters. On this day of remembrance, we return to you with chastened hearts. Receive us with favor, God, our rock and our help. Amen. So there are 4 times during the year, the liturgical year, that we recite the Yizkor service. On the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Shavuot, Pesach, and with Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. And then, of course, now on Yom Kippur. And while it's always an important service, and it's always in the service of bringing to mind people we have lost, people we have loved and lost, people who are no longer with us. Somehow, and maybe it's just my own upbringing, the Yizkor on Yom Kippur takes on the most resonance of all 4 recitations. So I invite you, please, to turn to page 477. We begin with the chanting of Enosh Kechatzir Yamav at the top of the page.
Enosh kechatzir yamav, ketzitz hasadeh ken yatzitz, ki ruachav rabo ve'eneinu. Velo yakirenu od mekomo v'chesed Adonai me'olam ve'ad olam al yireav v'tzidkato livnei vanim.
Page 478. God, you are my God. At first light, I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh longs for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So do I look for you in the sanctuary, to behold your power and your glory. Your love is better than life. My lips will extol you. And I will praise you with my life, for you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I sing for joy. Page 480. Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu ben anosh v'techashvehu. Adam lehevel dama yamav kitzel over. V'boker yatzitz v'chalaf le'erev yumolel v'yavesh. God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. You redeem the soul of your servants, God, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. Eternal God, you have been our refuge in all generations. Before the mountains were born, or earth and universe brought forth from eternity to eternity, you are God. For 1,000 years are in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep us away. We are like a dream at daybreak. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. The number of our years may be many or few, yet vain toil fills their span, for it is soon ended, and we fly away. So teach us to number our days, that we may grow wise in heart, that your servants understand your ways, and your children see your glory. Let the beauty of our eternal God be with us, and may our work have lasting value, that the work of our hands be enduring. We continue on the bottom of page 483.
Esayna el harim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz Ayitein lamot raglecha Ayanum shomrecha Hine lo yanum velo yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomrecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka V'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor, Adonai yishmor, yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam, me'ata ve'ad olam.
I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the eternal, maker of heaven and earth. God will not allow your foot to slip. Your guardian does not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The eternal is your keeper. The eternal is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The eternal will guard you from all evil. God will protect your being. The eternal will guard you, coming and going from this time forth and forever. We continue on page 487. Let us call to mind the great and good, through whom the eternal has done wonders. These were leaders of the people, helping many with understanding and insight. Wise and eloquent in their teachings, they were just and loving in their deeds. All these were honored in their generations. They were the glory of their times. There are some who have left a name behind them whose remembrance is as honey in the mouth. People will declare their wisdom. All will tell of their goodness. And there are some who have left no memorial, whose names have vanished as though they had never been. But the goodness of their lives has not been lost, and their work cannot be blotted out. We continue with that most resonant of Psalms, Psalm 23, the bottom of page 488.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi, lo echsor, binot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo גם כי אלה בגץ על מוות לא אירע, כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך. המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, בבית אדוני לאורך ימים, לאורך ימים.
Eternal God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Page 490, middle of the page. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. So I invite you now to take a few moments and look at the Yizkor prayer, the first of the two Yizkor prayers. Recite them if you want more than one time in the memory of more than one person whom you'd like to remember. And we'll come back together in a few moments and we'll recite the prayer, the second prayer